is going on, everybody? What is going on? The Catch fam, my name is John Dawson, and in today's video, we are hopping into another 2023 fantasy football mock draft. For today's video, we've got a 10-team full PPR mock draft. We are drafting from the 1.7 overall. This format will be a 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 flex, kicker, defense, and 5 bench spot format, guys. I have a ton of mock drafts out so far through the offseason. If you guys are looking for a different format, 8 teams, 12 teams, drafting from a different draft position, whatever it may be, make sure you check out the rest of the videos. And if you guys are looking for another format, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I will try my best to get it worked into the schedule, but I should have a video coming out from every draft position for 8-team, 10-team, and 12-team leagues. If you guys are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe on the way in. Other than that, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop into today's video. All right, so like I said, for the purpose of today's mock draft, we are drafting from the 1.7 overall. Kind of a weird spot to draft from. I mean, maybe a running back that you prefer falls out there. In some leagues, maybe Bijan makes it there. Most of the leagues I've been drafting in or mock drafting with, that's not going to happen, but maybe Austin Eckler falls out there. This is always a position where you could go hero running back if you're confident in the quality of running back that is there and you don't feel like you're reaching. Outside of that, you may be starting your draft with a wide receiver, which of course is perfectly fine. And then if you wanted to go hero running back, there might be a running back there for you at the 2.4 as well. So let's kind of sit back, see what happens. Sometimes you can get some really good wide receiver value right here. You know, Tyreek Hill might fall out, but regardless, I mean, we're in a position where we can draft Bijan Robinson, which I'm not going to pass up. Tyreek Hill would be perfectly fine here, of course, but give me Bijan all day long. And now, for me, we're not going to worry about the running back position for quite some time. We're going to filter through some RB2s in this build and take that upside, take that positional advantage with Bijan Robinson, and call it a day for some time. So now we're just going to be going aggressive at wide receiver. So let's think about the 2.4 overall. Who might be available at that selection? Well, you know, in a 10-man format, you might have some better options, of course, in comparison to a 12 or 14 team format. So you might be able to come into the 2.4 with some really good value. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown goes at the 1.10. Garrett Wilson's gone at the 2.1. So that still leaves Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams, and Jalen Waddle on the board. So we have got a ton of talent nonetheless. So for me, A.J. Brown or Devontae Adams will be this next selection. You really can't go wrong. I do think A.J. Brown brings a little bit more upside just because of, you know, the quarterback play out of Jalen Hurts compared to what we're expecting out of Jimmy Garoppolo with the Raiders and Devontae Adams. But at the end of the day, does it really matter for Adams? I'm not quite sure. So we'll take him as our primary wide receiver. You know, if you wanted to go Waddle or Olave, even maybe Devonta Smith, you know, you're kind of fighting for that upside in comparison to, you know, what the veteran Devontae Adams brings to the table. I understand that argument as well, but I just think Adams, your wide receiver 3 last year, wide receiver 2 the year before that, wide receiver 1 the year before that. You know, you just can't pass up on what Adams brings to the table. And, you know, if you are worried about some of the potential quarterback play and everything out of Jimmy Garoppolo, just don't forget Devontae Adams. 34.3 fantasy points in week 17 last year with Jared Stidham at quarterback, and then 12.3 fantasy points in week 18 with Jared Stidham at quarterback. So I think all in all, at the end of the day, Devontae Adams should be just fine. And honestly, is a pretty dang good value in the second round. So there's our wide receiver 1. What are we going to do next? At the 3.7, at the 4.4, I'm just drafting my wide receiver 2 and my flex player who I want to be another wide receiver. So 3 wide receivers in a row. Don't get stressed about it, guys. There is a ton of value at the running back position when we get to those mid rounds and even that dead zone running back spot in your drafts as well. I think going hero running back has a lot of people worried this year for whatever reason. I would not be worried. And I do think, you know, at the end of the day, there's still pretty decent value at wide receiver, you know, late in the draft, but that's how it always is. There's always wide receiver value throughout drafts. So I think you want those studs at the wide receiver position in these full PPR formats, which is what a majority of people are playing. And now this is what we're practicing for in today's video. So for me, knock out that wide receiver 2 early, then knock out that wide receiver 3 early, or if you want to look at it as your flex player, early as well. So, I mean, the only other thing that I would consider here at the 3.7 or 4.4 is one of those stud quarterbacks. Like if we're sitting there at the 4.4 and like Jalen Hurts is available, that's something we're going to have to consider. But at the same time, I think in these 10-team formats, you can sit back a little bit at the quarterback position and still have some pretty good value fall to you. Nonetheless, I mean, we're moving into the 3.7 and no quarterbacks are off the board. I mean, Team 6 has Kelsey. Maybe they take Mahomes. So maybe that's something that we think about. We're looking at the wide receiver position at the moment. T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel. Amari Cooper's actually probably the wide receiver I prefer. And then there goes Jalen Hurts. But also T. Higgins available right here feels like a really good value if he does fall. I won't be surprised if he's selected here. I mean, okay, yeah, Higgins is on the board. I think he's the best available player. We go T. Higgins. And then moving into the 4.4, I start to look at both Amari Cooper, who I'd be surprised if Cooper falls, but I don't know. All the teams in front of me only have wide receivers right now, so it's possible. And the next player I'm looking at is DJ Moore, hands down. So, a lot of good available players at the moment. Jahmyr Gibbs just went off the board. There goes Jonathan Taylor, who, at the time I'm recording this, we're expecting to probably have a trade destination by this coming Tuesday. So, maybe Jonathan Taylor is one of the best values in your drafts right now. Could definitely be so, but he's still kind of in a gray area. A lot of good running backs in this tier, but like I said, we're going to kind of wait and hold off until we can get into like the DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, Isaiah Pacheco, Rashad White, David Montgomery tier. Take like two of those guys and take a, kind of like an Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, AJ Dillon type player, maybe Jerick McKinnon as our RB4. So we're going to hold off. We have the upside in Bijan Robinson. There goes all of those elite quarterbacks. If one of them was still sitting here at the 4.4, that would be something I'd strongly consider. But let's just go ahead and take our next wide receiver. Whether you want to go Amari Cooper, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, I don't really mind. But, I've been drafting a ton of DJ Moore throughout the offseason. And while I do like Amari Cooper in this range, I think it's fitting that he goes at the 4.5. For me, DJ Moore is just going to bring more upside to the table. And I think we have, enough stability between Devontae Adams and T. Higgins already. So I say we go for a little bit more risk, go for a little bit more upside, and go with DJ Moore. All right, moving along to the 5.7 and 6.4. At this point, we do want to start to consider that RB2 position, of course. So we'll kind of see who's available when we get to that range. I mean, I don't think like Aaron Jones, Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, any of those names will be there. Maybe Miles Sanders. And DeAndre Swift's probably the player I'm looking at, which I know some of you guys out there are not fans of. But for me, the upside that Swift brings to the table, being that pass-catching running back for the Philadelphia Eagles, he's a player I've talked about a ton. If you guys go through and watch some of these mock drafts, you're going to hear me talk about DeAndre Swift literally a ton. So for me, as a RB2, that's where I like him. Maybe prefer him as an RB3. But still, as an RB2, that's where I like him, especially behind a player like Bijan Robinson, who's going to bring a tremendous amount of upside to the table already. So I understand the risk with Swift, but I always want to be drafting for upside. I certainly think he brings that to the table. So looking through today's draft, even a 10-team format, some pretty good value. I mean, Metcalf falls to the 5th, Mahomes in the 4th, Gibbs at the end of the 3rd. So overall, a pretty good value throughout this draft. I mean, Tony Pollard at the end of the 2nd round. We got Bijan, the 7th overall pick. Tyreek Hill goes at the 8th overall pick. So you guys, you just never know. Every draft is so different. And at the end of the day, you just kind of have to embrace that, right? So we'll kind of see what happens here. But, I don't necessarily think we have to go RB2 at the 5.7. I think we can actually go ahead and take another wide receiver, which some of you guys might be saying like, well, what? Why? We just drafted 3 in a row. Well, for me, in your full PPR formats, I say this all the time. Wide receiver is going to be the most important position in your build. And I want a 4th wide receiver on my bench that I trust that can filter into the wide receiver 1 and 2 spots, during bye weeks or, God forbid, any injuries. And then, of course, another player that I can move into the flex spot as well at any time throughout the season. So plenty of good available players. I love Christian Kirk in this range, but I also really like Brandon Ayuk, who was a wide receiver 15 last year, 8 touchdowns, just over 1,000 receiving yards, just under 80 receptions, and a very efficient offense. Brandon Ayuk as a wide receiver 4. Absolutely love that. Like I said, don't mind Christian Kirk. I really like Drake London right here as well. I like Chris Godwin. I think he's a great value. Tyler Lockett's okay. I'm not against Terry McLaurin. We know he's dealing with that toe injury and everything. But for me personally, trying to hold off another round or two if I'm going to go with a Washington wide receiver and land Jahan Dotson because I do think he brings more upside to the table. But man, he's a hot name right now. He's moving up draft boards. So this might be kind of the range that if you want Dotson, you have to go ahead and take him. I mean, I see him drafted very close to Terry McLaurin at this point in the offseason quite a bit. So let's talk about the 6.4. Kind of light in terms of a running back draft right now. So we could go ahead and go running back 2 here. You know, Miles Sanders is here. DeAndre Swift is here. But there's also just one elite quarterback available in my eyes. We're going to take him right here. We're going to go Trevor Lawrence. And then we're just going to see what running backs come to us at the 7.7 and 8.4. You know, we could have locked up Miles Sanders right there and then maybe still have been able to land DeAndre Swift at the 7.7. Then we'd be looking really good at the running back position. But now, you know, some of these teams behind us, right, they need their RB2s, right? Team 5 went out and got Pierce behind Chubb. Team 6 went out and got Sanders behind Barkley. Very good pairings there. I just want to go ahead and take that elite quarterback off the board. In my mind, you know, I think Lawrence, after T-Law is taken, there's a pretty steep drop-off at the position. Then I want to see, for the purpose of today's mock, what value we can land at running back. We know we're set at wide receiver. We're going to look for some kind of late round wide receiver value at the end of the draft. But let's just see what we can come up with, you know, getting an elite quarterback and then kind of holding off at the RB2, RB3, and RB4 spot. That is really our primary goal for the next couple of rounds. Let's fill up our roster with running backs. And then we can't forget about the tight end position, right? I haven't mentioned that at all as we see TJ Hawkinson and Darren Waller off of the board. For me this year, you know, unless Kelsey comes to you at just a screaming value or Mark Andrews comes to you at a screaming value, I'm really holding off at the tight end position. I think for me, when you look at the point differential last year between the tight end 4 or 5, leading up to like the tight end 12, essentially, the point differential was not that large. So for me, I just think it's better to hold off, you know, Pat Fryermuth, David Njoku, Cole Kmet, and then if you're not 100% confident in those guys, draft a second tight end, okay? Draft Dalton Kincaid, maybe Greg Dulcich, Tyler Higbee, get a second guy. And at the end of the day, I just think you don't need to panic on the position, so we're not going to. All right, so our risk pays off there. We get Trevor Lawrence in the 6th. We get an elite quarterback in my eyes, someone who has the potential to easily finish as a top 5 player at the position. And we still get the RB2 that we want. You know, I maybe prefer Miles Sanders, especially if you want, you know, a running back that's going to bring some consistency this year more than likely. Maybe Dameon Pierce or Alexander Madison in that range as well. But, you know, we get the upside. We get DeAndre Swift. I'm not going to be against that, especially having the stability of Bijan Robinson in our RB1 spot. So, all right, the 2 teams in front of me here are both sitting with 2 running backs. They're kind of both in a position where they could easily be going running back here, moving into the beginning of the 8th round. There goes Javonte Williams at the end of the 7th. But for me, Isaiah Pacheco, Rachaad White, David Montgomery, these are the names I'm looking at when we're in this range. I really like Rachaad White. I mean, we're practicing for full PPR, so I'm looking for those running backs who are going to have that pass catching upside. DeAndre Swift, absolutely going to bring that to the table as long as he's healthy. And I think when we look at Rachaad White, you know, Lenny Fournette obviously was the starter for majority of the season, or at least the first half of the season. And at the same time, Rachaad White, who we're going to go ahead and select here, still had 50 receptions. So I think when you look at him in a full season with Baker Mayfield, we now know, that he is the starting quarterback for the Buccaneers. He had the highest check down rate of any quarterback in the league last year. Kind of a small sample size. I get that, you know, kind of bouncing around at times. Obviously, you know, switch teams in the middle of the year and everything, but still, we know Baker is going to check the football down. He's going to be playing from behind quite a bit. I don't think this defense is going to be great for the Buccaneers. I think ultimately their offense is going to be in a position where they need to pass the football more than they need to run it. So if you're worried about the Bucs offensive line, if you're worried about them maybe not scoring a ton of touchdowns this year, and I mean, honestly, like on paper, this offense isn't awful. We just know Baker's the quarterback, right? But Chris Godwin's still there, obviously. Mike Evans still there. Kate Otton's a pretty decent young tight end. The Russell Gage injury kind of hurts, but ultimately, this offense, even though it doesn't look great on paper, can still produce good enough fantasy numbers, especially in full PPR. And getting back to my point, I just think Rachaad White is in a good position where the Buccaneers are going to have to lean on him somewhat in the passing game, and Baker Mayfield specifically is going to be dumping it off to him quite a bit. So Rachaad White as a RB3 full PPR formats, I will take that all day long. All right, moving into the 9.7. My primary target right here is David Montgomery, but I have a feeling he's not going to fall to us. I mean, two teams behind us, right? They both have 3 running backs, so very likely that Monty goes. I mean, Hollywood Brown, a great option right there. But even if Monty does go, there's some other good names here. Dalvin Cook, A.J. Dillon, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson. So any of those guys that we want to grab as our RB4, I mean, you can go ahead and check the wide receiver position right here. There are names that I really like, Sky Moore, Romeo Dobbs, for example, but I think we just go ahead and we shore up the running back position. And I think that's a great start for a hero running back build. We get Bijan, we're set. That's our RB1 for the season, right? Then we go out and we draft the 4 best wide receivers on the board. DJ Moore over Amari Cooper, Deebo Samuel, you could certainly debate, probably even Metcalf as well. Brandon Ayuk over London or Kirk. Guys, when you're looking at these mocks, don't get super fed up with, oh my gosh, like I can't believe you drafted this player over that player. Just look at the roster construction itself. Okay. If you prefer Amari Cooper over DJ Moore, if you prefer Terry McLaurin over Brandon Ayuk, that's completely okay. Just go out and draft those guys and try to replicate this specific roster build is all I'm saying. Even with the running backs too, if there are guys that you prefer over DeAndre Swift, Rachaad White, or David Montgomery, that's completely okay as well. At the end of the day, just make sure, if you're trying to follow this specific strategy, that this is what you want to follow at the end of the day. All right, let's take our tight end just in case, because tight ends are absolutely thinning out. So let's get Cole Kmet, your tight end 7 last year. Bears offense, their passing offense specifically, is going to improve this season. So for me, I think Kmet is a steal. I really, and kind of, last year he was just building so much hype throughout the offseason, right? And it just kind of surprises me that after finishing decently last year as a tight end 7, even though the beginning of the year was not that great, once the Bears offense started picking up and Justin Fields started picking up as a quarterback, Kmet started picking up, and I think that's only going to bleed into this coming season. So, for me, it's just odd. Last year, it's so much hype about Kmet. Then obviously the beginning of the year was a little bit disappointing, but like the end of the season was not that disappointing. And you just haven't gotten really any hype around Cole Kmet whatsoever going into this year. But for me, Kmet, my favorite late round tight end value. I'll take him all day long right there, and I'm perfectly okay with him as our tight end 1. If you're worried about, going tight end late, like I said earlier on, if you want to draft a second guy, Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid, Tyler Higbee, and Conquo, Dulcich, whoever you prefer, that's completely fine. But personally for me, coming out of my draft, I don't necessarily want to take up a second roster spot with a second tight end. I'd rather figure that out, on the waiver wire if I felt it was necessary. But nonetheless, here's your build so far, okay? 4 wide receivers, 4 running backs, 1 quarterback, 1 tight end. That's generally where I'm at this point in the draft. You can make one decision here, really. Do you want to finish your build with 6 total wide receivers, which is what I prefer in full PPR formats? If you're playing a double flex, that is what I would recommend doing. If you're playing a 1 flex, well, you could go 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers. But I think at this point in the draft, the only running back that I feel super confident in drafting is Brian Robinson. I do like Zach Charbonnet. I'm not 100% out on Devon Achane yet, and I do like Jerick McKinnon. So there are some options there, I guess. But for me, ultimately, I probably just want to finish this thing out with the best 2 wide receivers left on the board. So for me, I'll take Sky Moore here. He's a hot name right now in the fantasy community. I was actually a little bit surprised that he was available right there. He's a guy whose ADP is so different between the mock drafts and real drafts that are going on right now. You never really know when Sky Moore is going to be taken off the board, but obviously linked to a great quarterback and Patrick Mahomes, linked to a great offense overall. And for me, just a big fan of Sky Moore as like a wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. So I understand that there's some risk and that the rookie season was bad, but obviously all the reports are indicating that Sky Moore has been practicing with the ones. Obviously, Kadarius Toney's been hurt. He's going to be back week 1. We know MVS is going to be in the mix for the number 1 overall offensive group, but I still think Sky Moore as a slot receiver, if he does kind of grow into that role, because this is a tough offense to learn. So I think if he grows into it, he's had a whole, another offseason, everything with the team. Obviously, there's a ton of upside there. So I'll take him all day long as a wide receiver 5. So, in this range, I like Cortland Sutton. I like Romeo Dobbs. I actually kind of like Alan Lazard, but he's been banged up. I kind of like Jacoby Myers. At this point in the draft, like, there's really no reason to debate these late round wide receivers. Just take guys that you like. But, the other thing we could do here is take a 5th running back. We'll go ahead and we'll do it for the purpose of today's mock because this is not a double flex format. And, like I said, he could take any of those wide receivers, but let's go ahead and take Zach Charbonnet off the board. And that way, if some of you guys out there don't have full confidence in this running back room, well, maybe that helps a little bit, just gets us one more piece. Charbs is a player that a lot of us love coming out of college. And at the end of the day is going to bring that pass catching upside. Once again, kind of a theme with our running back room today. And, as an RB5, I'll take him all day long. And like I said, 2 ways to finish out this build. Do you want to go 6 total wide receivers and draft 2 to end your draft? Or do you want to go with a 5-5 build, 5 running backs, 5 wide receivers? Either way, I don't really mind. You should probably look at who's on the board, who's the best overall value, and decide then. But like I said, if you play in a double flex format, I do prefer getting 6 total wide receivers because for me, full PPR formats, like I said earlier in the draft, the wide receiver position is always going to be the most important thing. So just kind of look at your board, who's there in terms of value and what format are you playing in, and then make that decision. But ultimately, for a hero running back build, this is what I prefer. Okay, 1 quarterback, 1 tight end, 5 wide receivers, 6 wide receivers, however you want to look at it, and then 4 or 5 running backs as well. But I think ultimately this was a good draft. I went out and got players that I have conviction in. But like I said, when you're looking at the board, if there are other wide receivers that you prefer, other running backs that you prefer, that is completely okay. But we'd be starting Trevor Lawrence, starting Cole Kmet, starting Bijan Robinson and DeAndre Swift, starting Adams and Higgins, and flexing DJ Moore. If we were in a double flex, we'd be also flexing Brandon Ayuk. But for now, Ayuk on the bench, Rachaad White, Monty, Sky Moore, and Zach Charbonnet on the bench. This is, in my mind, as good of a build as you're going to get going hero running back from the 7th overall position. Maybe I prefer like AJ Brown falls out over Adams. I think he brings more upside to the table, or maybe I prefer like Garrett Wilson or Amon-Ra's there, but those are just hot names in the community right now. People are going to go out and draft those guys. But T. Higgins, I thought was a great value at the 3.7. I'm a huge fan of DJ Moore. Drafted him over some other good veterans like Cooper, Debo, DK Metcalf. But like I said, I think there's more upside with DJ Moore. And I love Brandon Ayuk as a wide receiver 4. But I also really love Christian Kirk in that range. And I also think Drake London's a great selection as well. I mean, Christian Watson wasn't available for us, but sometimes he's available in that same tier. So I think he's another guy to consider there. But ultimately, very happy with those first 4 wide receivers that we took. I think Sky Moore, a good value in the 11th round. And I think ultimately, some people might look at this running back room and, like the double hero running back approach is getting really popular this year. And like, if you don't have like Bijan and Chubb or, Barkley and Gibbs or whatever, like people are looking at your team like it's awful. But I think there's a lot of value in players like DeAndre Swift, Rachaad White, David Montgomery, players in that range. So for me, I'm perfectly okay with this running back build. I'd rather take the value at the wide receiver position. But we're going to go ahead and draft a kicker, and that will wrap up today's mock draft. So we'll just go with Dicker the kicker. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of today's mock draft as a whole. Let me know, if you guys are drafting in a 10-team format, what you guys thought and if this video was helpful for you guys. Like I said, I have a ton of other mock drafts out. I will have a mock draft from every draft position for 8-team, 10-team, and 12-team formats before the season starts. Guys, we go live all the time on the channel. We have a ton of 12-teamers on those live streams, so make sure to go through, check out our videos. You might find the exact roster settings you guys are looking for, the exact draft position, whatever it may be. And if you don't see what you're looking for, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I will try my best to get it worked into the schedule, but I've taken so many mock draft requests already. It's getting very tight as we are heading into week 1 kickoff. Nonetheless, guys, if you found today's video helpful, if you enjoyed the content, really does help me out if you guys hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you as a part of the community. Hit the like button on the way out. Check out all of our links down below. Join our free Discord. You guys can hop on there, send out your own mock drafts. We have a ton of mock drafts going on the Discord all day long, completely free to join. Follow us on Instagram, do all the YouTube stuff, and that's going to wrap up today's video. So here's one last look at the team. Trevor Lawrence, Cole Kmet, Bijan, DeAndre Swift, Rashad White, David Montgomery, Zach Charbonnet, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, Sky Moore, Cowboys defense, and Dicker the kicker. So that's going to wrap it up. There's your team for you, drafting from the 1.7 and 10-team format today. So with that, I will say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening, and remember, you saw it here on The Catch.